All right, Amber, welcome to the Lift Smart podcast. I'm really happy to have you on here, man. I always appreciate talking to you, and I certainly appreciate you setting aside the time. What time is it in Vancouver right now?
It's 5:30 p.m.
Oh, that's not too bad.
No,
That's not so bad. It's not as rude as I thought it might be. Sometimes
no,
I'm
not at all.
worried when I give people a sort of narrow field of times to book in. I'm like, oh, I hope these aren't going to be too ordinary for you, and you
Is
don't
it
have to get up super
morning
early.
there
Yeah,
for
it's
you?
morning here, so it's like 10 a.m. here.
Okay.
In the future for you, so we're a day
Yeah,
ahead.
you're tomorrow.
Yes, that's right. We're coming at you from tomorrow. So like I said, I'm really excited to be able to talk to you, not only because we have this sort of really odd 6 degrees of separation thing happening in the entire time I was in Edmonton, knew the same people as you, but never knew you. But also because I think you're going to have some really solid perspectives on a couple of things that I think will be genuinely interesting to a lot of people. So for the people that are less familiar with you, I'm sure there's going to be a couple of people that know you or know of you, but for the people that are less familiar with you, tell us a bit about yourself, what you do, who you are as a coach, your background, everything like that.
Sure. So I'm Amber Dawn. I'm originally from Edmonton, Alberta. I'm now living in Vancouver, Washington, down in the States, and I just recently made that move back in November. I have been personal training and coaching for almost 4 years now. And I still work with plenty of in-person individuals, and a lot of my business is online now. That has definitely changed since I moved down to the States. Kind of a goal of mine, but
Mhm.
I'll never stop working with people in
Yeah.
person. It keeps us fresh as trainers and coaches, and it helps keep our eyes very keen.
Well, it's just fun as
So
well, right? Like it's just,
yeah, it's
yeah, I think
it's
people, we always have this like urge to almost like rationalize why we train
mhm.
people one-on-one. We're always like, because it, gives you these skills and it does this. And it's like, okay, like I agree with all that, but it's also really fun. And I just really like working with people.
Absolutely. You build relationships with those
Yeah.
people, and they hopefully are excited to see
Yeah.
you however many times they see you every week. And it's nice to get an hour with those individuals
Mm.
every week. So
Yeah. So where did you like what got you started in coaching, I guess? Like what was that impetus?
um
Like what did that look like for you?
well, I still remember I worked with a personal trainer back in Edmonton. You may have heard of him. His name is Anthony Harder.
No, not
He,
familiar
he
to me. But I
was
mean, there's plenty of people that I
he's
don't know of,
actually
right?
living he's in Australia now,
Okay,
actually.
cool.
But we started working together in 2014.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember telling him that I would never work with people. I would never be a personal trainer. And
And here we are.
here we are.
Yeah.
Eventually, I found myself engulfed in um, wanting to educate myself, watching YouTube videos, reading as much as I could. I just wanted to help people because I was learning. It was making an impact on my life and my well-being, and I wanted to pass that on
Mm-hmm.
essentially. So I was working an office job, like a very cushy office managerial role, and I just decided to quit one day and start a business.
Mm-hmm. So, like,
Um,
what was that for you? Like, what was that moment like? Because there are people that dream about that, right? Like, I remember specifically for me the day I stopped, where I was like, I'm done with teaching. I'm not doing it anymore.
it
Not in a broad
was
sense, but as a high school teacher. So, what was that moment for you?
well, it was terrifying for one, but it was very freeing because the individuals that I was working with actually very much supported it.
Mm-hmm.
They knew that I was unhappy with what I was doing, and when it came to the situation where I brought it up to them, they wholeheartedly supported it. And the funny thing was, is the gym that I went to work at was actually across the street from the office that I
Okay.
was working in.
Handy.
And they would come in and train there. And it was like we never lost touch, but they were just like, they continue to support me. It's super cool to see you doing what you're doing. You're just so happy doing what you're doing. And it was. Um, it was very hard, of course, because I didn't have a following. I didn't start in a Good Life
Hmm.
or any box gym. So I had to work my ass off to build up a clientele. But I've always kind of done the whole throw fire, like just throw gas on it and see what happens.
Yeah. Yep.
Um, and I have a friend back home, Andrew Coates,
Yep.
who has been a friend of mine for a long time, and
Hmm.
he was very, very supportive, and he helped me through the beginning of, I guess, this whole journey. And he gave me a lot of really great advice that I still remember to this day. And
Hmm.
Dean Guido was also a friend as well, and he was inspirational in this whole trip.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's interesting that I always find it funny that Edmonton actually seems to produce these really, really great coaches. Not only
Yeah.
like yourself, but there's Andrew, like you mentioned. There's Dean Somerset, who's
Hmm.
also in Edmonton, which is I don't think I
It's
couldn't say like, oh, there's something in the water. It just happens to be that there's some really great coaches coming out of that city, and people don't seem to really join those dots as much. And I guess like that's probably a question that I would like to ask you is how did you find starting your career in Edmonton, which is primarily, let's say, like finance and resource driven, right? Like
hmm
as very much an oil town, like the hockey team is
hmm
named the Oilers, right?
yeah.
So how did you find your transition going from not only the security of office work, but that's probably more held up and valued at the time, I would imagine,
hmm
as being like a genuine career as opposed to fitness, which may have been, I'm not going to say laughed at, but not seen as viable for people. Like, did you find that there was a lot of initial resistance to fitness when you initially started 4 years ago? Like, what's that transition been? Have you seen many changes in the perception or the zeitgeist of that?
I would say yes,
Yeah.
because it seems that it has grown exponentially in Edmonton. Um, when I started, it wasn't like, it definitely wasn't as big. Strength training wasn't as big.
Mm,
Powerlifting wasn't as big. And through the years, like even in the gym that I worked at, which was Evolve Downtown, it exploded. The fitness
mm,
community just like blew up. And I think it was just something shifted.
yeah.
Um, the environment in Edmonton changed, and like you named a lot of really fantastic trainers back in Edmonton, and I think people just started to become more aware.
Mm. More
Um,
aware of what do you think?
I think the facilities that we had,
Sure.
Evolve really kind of changed things in Edmonton. We didn't have facilities like that, and that brought a lot of different individuals in, particularly downtown, which was, every Evolve is laid out the same. It is very sports driven. However,
Mm,
the downtown location brought a more Gen Pop fitness focused scene. And it's when people knew that that facility was there, I think things started to kind of change.
yeah.
Um, and it grew from there.
Yeah. What was your experience, I guess, additionally, in being a strength focused coach? I mean, that's sort of like one thing that already would have been a little bit more obtuse because even I remember, being in Canada at the time, like I was in Canada 4 years ago for sure.
Mhm.
And powerlifting still wasn't particularly big, right? It wasn't
No.
particularly big. It wasn't really this, I would say, like commercially known thing. People weren't
Mhm.
really approaching you a lot and be like, hey, I want to learn the power lifts. Like it would just
Mhm.
be like, oh, I just want to squat bench dead, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Um, being a strength coach in a lesser known sport, like as a female, like what was that experience for you? Like, because I can only see things through my quite limited lens, right? Like I struggled in PT, right? I did,
Mhm.
and PT is tough. I'm never going to say like,
Mhm.
you love it, you work it, you never work a day in your life. Like you work your ass
Mhm.
off as a PT,
You
right?
do.
You're in there for like in the gym for endless hours, and you're getting paid for a fraction of them.
Yeah.
But I also maybe fell into what was considered more of the norm, you know, in PT. So I started in a box gym. I had a lot of leads given to me. I had a lot of infrastructure around me, and I wasn't really trying to focus on any kind of like particular niche because of that. I could just like fall into leads. I still had to work hard, but I'd fall into leads. Again, your experience as a female strength coach, what was that starting off like? Because you're exposed to different obstacles, right?
It was very difficult. Absolutely. And for a long time, I struggled to kind of find my identity. I wanted to be a part of this YEG fitness scene for a little bit. And then I just decided that's not who I am, because it isn't who I am. And there was one thing that Andrew told me that I still remember today, and I pass it on to other people, is that like, you essentially just don't try to be anything that you're not. Stick to what you know, and that's going to bring people in. And regardless of what the scene was in Edmonton per se, I stuck to my guns and I did what I loved and I coached what I loved. And that passion, it comes out of you and people feel it. And whether you want to compete or not, that's fine. But I was slowly starting to get more people wanting to come to me to learn how to get strong. And again, I never pushed anyone to want to compete. Eventually people want to compete because they find that drive. But yeah, it was super difficult in the beginning. And obviously I moved down here for a reason. It's still not very big up in Canada, but I just think if anybody's going to listen to this and they're kind of in a similar situation, just stick to what you believe in and everything will fall into place as it should. You might have to work extra hard, but it will fall into place.
Yeah, I think that there's this real sort of tug of war with coaching, especially in the online sphere, right? Where you're told to be as authentic as possible. But for some people, for some reason, authentic means you have to show that you journal every day and get up at 4 a.m. to meditate. And that's authenticity. It's like, how is that authenticity? Like, if you do that, I'm not saying be ashamed of it. Like, if you do that, if you genuinely do that, do that. But like being your most authentic self doesn't mean being something that you're not. And I can't believe that I actually have to say that, but it really does mean, like you said, like just leaning as hard as you possibly can into what you are passionate about. And so I guess like you being as passionate as you are and seeing that through the early stages and early obstacles of your career, like what do you think some of the more universal appeal is about strength training? Because you know that's obviously, I think, ultimately what we communicate to people, like through our passions, is like these sort of like higher order things. Like you can be able to tell people about biomechanics, but if you can't relate it to their lives and tell them how it's going to fix problems in their lives and change them in a fundamental level, they won't care. So what do you think is some of the more like universal emotional or psychological traits that this tends to give to people that you were able to tap into?
I would say that you can surpass any limits that you put up for yourself, that you might lay down. Because I mean, we've all done it. We set these limitations for ourselves and we create boundaries for ourselves that we don't think that we can cross. And I think what really draws people into that is this: they get a taste for it. They get a taste for what strength can really feel like. And like, I'm going to keep pushing this. I want to see how far I can go. And it becomes very emotional. It becomes very psychological. And I mean, you talk to anyone in powerlifting, anyone in any sort of strength sport, and I think that's evidently what it comes down to, is like they just want to keep pushing those limits.
And it's almost like you like end up giving them that point, I guess, to like how you were describing your own origin in coaching, is like maybe they start to think, hey, maybe I can quit that office job. Hey, maybe maybe I can, I don't know, leave this partner. Maybe I can change this thing. Maybe I can move to Iceland. Like, I don't know.
And that's where coaching is not programming, right? Coaching is, how I see it is, I try to be a mentor of sorts to all of my clients. And whether you believe that you're a mentor or not, in some sense, you are mentoring these individuals. And the way I like to put it is like, I tell everybody that I work with that you are capable of so much more than you think that you are.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as you get that in your head and you start believing that you can do anything you set your mind to, the door's open.
Mm.
It might sound silly or cliche, but like I am a firm believer in that. Did I think I was going to be here working alongside Chris Fitchburg, one of the like best powerlifters? No.
Yeah,
But
certainly
here I
one of the
am.
most renowned coaches getting around at the moment, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I got the opportunity, asked by him personally, to come down here and be a part of his team.
Yeah.
I never ever thought that was going to happen.
It almost sounds like you should have like "Don't Stop Believing" by Journey playing in the background while you describe it. But it's fair though. Like I'm not taking the piss because I completely agree. Like I completely agree with everything you're saying. And it's like, I think one of the great things about coaching is that, or like the idea of realizing your potential doesn't ever have to be like this concrete thing. Like I think the important thing about realizing your potential is that maybe you won't ever fully realize it, but then that's sort of what makes it important, is that like, even if you can't realize it in your lifetime, you could still potentially pass those same ideas down to the people around you and to the people that come after you, right? That will continue to inspire and continue to bring people along on that journey with you.
Yep. Well, what you pass on to the people that you work with, they're going to pass it on to the people around them.
Mm.
So it's this line of inspiration that just keeps growing and growing and growing.
Yeah.
So
what was, I mean, you again, you made another big change, right? Like you picked yourself up from Edmonton and you moved to Washington State. I had to get that right, Washington State, which is Pacific Northwest. Yes. Am I getting all this correct? Okay, good. I'm terrible with geography. I'm really good with trivia, but I'm terrible at geography. So you picked yourself up and you moved down there. What was your biggest motivation for doing that? What were you seeing as like, you know, you mentioned that even like the powerlifting culture, I guess, is quite different in the States. You said it's still not as big in Canada. It's a lot bigger in the States. Like, what was your primary motivation for making that move?
It just felt like it was time. This might sound silly, but like growing up in Edmonton, I never felt that I was going to always be there. And I felt that there was always something bigger or something more out there for me. And I just wasn't sure what it was. And this opportunity came up and there wasn't a lot going on in Edmonton. Obviously, COVID, we were going through that. And I didn't know what was going to happen down the line. So this opportunity came about and I would have been absolutely silly to not take it. I had nothing holding me back. Family is very small back home. You know, I'm a single individual. I have no family of my own. So I just said, like, this is what I want to do. This is, I want to, one, grow my online business, but two, I want to be more part of an industry that I love so much. And I love powerlifting. I love what it brings to people. I love the community. And obviously I just love strength. So it was just, I knew it was right. I didn't question it. I came down in September of last year and Chris and I briefly talked business. And when I went back home, I kind of just messaged him and was like, is this really going to happen? Are we going to make it happen? He was like, I will do what it takes to get you here. And he said that. I started packing all my stuff up, put it into storage. I competed November 6th, or no, I competed November 7th, and I was moved down here on November 11th.
Nice. That's a big move. I think moving is stressful enough on its own, let alone when you've just competed and are probably feeling a bit busted up.
I was a stress case, basically. Like, I'm leaving everything behind.
Oh, and then you have to deal with immigration on top of that.
Oh my goodness. I got lucky, and a friend that follows me on Instagram actually reached out to me, and he lives in New York. He went through the same process that I went through, and he helped me through every step of the way. Like, super grateful for that. So, because it's a very stressful process.
Yeah, extremely. For sure. I mean, I can speak to that for sure. I've gone through it like a couple of times, and they have this way of talking to you and making you feel guilty for nothing. Like your paperwork can be absolutely pristine, and you feel like, oh my God, like I that's it. It's over. This is not going to happen, even though everything's perfect. So
Yes.
what, in terms of like moving down to the States, what are the biggest differences in powerlifting or coaching culture that you've noticed? Because you commented on that. What are those differences? What's sort of been like the biggest points of difference that you have noticed so far?
The amount of individuals that are very willing to jump in and start strength training.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't have to go out and, I guess, seek it. Whereas back home, I felt like I had to really, really push it and promote myself a lot. Whereas down here, I have people coming to me all the time. And that's very, very different. And that's very cool. And I'm very appreciative of it. It's just, there's just more of a desire, particularly from women, to get under a barbell, to just want to get strong.
Yeah. So what do you think is maybe, I mean, I think like 85% of the people that we work with on our powerlifting team here in Adelaide are female. And I couldn't tell you precisely why, but I guess there is starting to become this shift in powerlifting becoming somewhat more accessible to a wider variety of people, as opposed to being just sort of like that archetype of like, you have to be bald and tattooed and, super heavy in order to powerlift. And I guess like it's becoming more widely recognized on social media, which I think is good. But maybe also some pitfalls there. Like, what have you seen in terms of the greater level of acceptance in the wider powerlifting community of bringing people in that's been positive? And what do you think are maybe some consequences that we're also seeing from powerlifting becoming more widely socially recognized?
Consequences, I would definitely say these, I competed one time and now I'm a coach individuals. There's a lot more of those because the sport is growing so much that it's overwhelming to try and find a coach. A good coach. And people, particularly if you're new, and I can speak for myself, like when I reached out to Chris to be my coach, I didn't feel like I was worthy of his coaching, as silly as that sounds. But you get these individuals that are fresh, they're just starting out, and they might see somebody like Chris Bridgford himself and be too afraid to reach out to him for coaching. And so they're going to go with this maybe smaller coach that really doesn't have the credentials to be coaching.
Like the whole, oh no, they only train elite people, I couldn't possibly work with them.
And that was legitimately in the message that I sent for Chris. I don't know if you just work, just work with like elite level powerlifters, or if I'm good enough to work with you, but can we talk?
And more often than not, you find that, yes, they absolutely do talk. But I guess like what do you look for in a coach then? Like how would you guide people through that process? Like, what do you think the level of discernment has to be in your experience, especially as a female powerlifter and powerlifting coach?
That would, of course, depend on the individual, what kind of person you are. Are you an emotional athlete? If you are, do you need a coach that is more communicative, that is going to have more empathy? And a good example of that is Paulo Need, who is my nutrition coach, also a friend. And he is a fantastic nutrition coach for myself because of my history with eating disorders. He knows my mental struggles with like just my physical being, and he's empathetic towards that. However, he holds me accountable and he calls me on my shit, which I appreciate. And then from a training coaching standpoint, say you're a more independent lifter like myself. I don't need to have a coach there all the time, giving me feedback all the time. But if I request it, it's there. So if you're seeking out a coach, seek out a coach that is going to match you on a personality level. and tick off those boxes. Like it's okay to have a checklist of what you're looking for, because at the end of the day, you're going to have a relationship with this individual.
Yeah. I think maybe what are some red flags then, I guess, to you? Because, I think maybe a better question would be that, like, what do we think some red flags are? Because there's a lot of things that you might actually find that you are really open to over time, and that will probably develop. But like, to you, what do you see as being like, oh, like that should really be something that you look out for?
First thing I would look for is like, how long have they had their clientele? Like, are they constantly refreshing clients? Are you constantly seeing new and different athletes on their roster, or have they held on to athletes for 6 months, a year, 2 years, etc.?
Always having 3 spots open.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, that's okay. You can always have room for more. But if they're constantly recycling different athletes, that's a flag. Next thing I would look for is, how are they themselves as an athlete? How do they train? How do they perform? How do they perform on the platform? How are they when they compete? Something that I've learned for myself over time is, like, you are a representation of your business.
Absolutely.
And you as an athlete, if you are going out there and stepping on the platform and you're throwing hissy fits, that's not an attractive quality as a coach.
Yeah.
You need to keep your shit together. It doesn't matter what position you're in. If you're the athlete at that time, or if you're the coach, you need to keep your shit together, because you are representing yourself.
Yeah, in the inevitable post-meet recap where somehow it's always the judge's fault, or it's like, got some bad calls, or it was treated unfairly. It's like, I think a lot of those really small things do indicate to you how people perceive what's going on, I guess, internally for them, because that is going to be how they communicate to you, right? Like, they're going to very much be giving you what their perception of the sport is. And so you need to be wary of that.
Is that coach capable of holding themselves accountable? Something, again, with coaches have coaches. Does that coach you're looking at, have they been through multiple coaches over a short period of time as well? And that's going to show you, like, are they accountable? So those would be like my check boxes that I would check off in looking for somebody that I would stick with.
Yeah, I think like the going through multiple coaches in a short amount of time as well. That's obviously like a lot of it's just indicative of behavior, right? Like when you go through a lot of coaches in a very small amount of time, you have to think, okay, what's the common denominator here? Can it be that every single one of those coaches got it wrong? Or is it maybe that this person is resistant to change or feedback? In the same way with competition, I think this is where maybe people get things a little bit confused, is that you don't necessarily have to be the single greatest competitor. But I think, like you said, how you compose yourself in competition speaks a lot better than your numbers. Like, I know some people that are relatively strong but are just kind of awful people, and it's like, do you really want to be coached by them? Like, how often are they spending their days calling people out on social media? How often are they talking about how X, Y, and Z is wrong, or an idiot, or this person's too skinny, don't listen to them, this person doesn't lift enough, don't listen to them? Like, I'm sure you've seen that.
Oh yeah, it's all over the place. And for myself, I don't want to associate myself with a coach that does that finds himself online constantly in social media battles, or is just a loudmouth. Like, that's not an attractive quality to me, and I'm not like that, and I don't want to be associated with someone like that.
Yeah.
And even if I had a client like that, I would separate myself from that client.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm working with coaches. I do talk to them about there being such a thing as bad revenue, right? Like, you can take somebody on, and just because they're paying you doesn't mean that it's good for your business or good for your coaching. Because if somebody is doing the wrong things, and they won't listen to you about the behavior, again, it's like, you know, they're representing your business as much as you are representing your business. And if they know that, if people outside know that this individual is associated with you and what you do, you have to consider what the optics are going to be. Like I chew my lifters out sometimes for being in the gym and dropping the bar from the hip in like a commercial gym, because I'm like, don't ever do that, right? Like, don't do that. And I don't really care what the excuse is. I'm like, don't do that, man. Like, I don't want that behavior associated with what I do as a coach.
Mm-hmm. So there's too much of that crap on social media today. And a lot of our business is on social media. That's how business is today.
Yeah.
So be very cognizant of what you are seeing. This, say, coach you are wanting to reach out to, see what their content is like.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely.
It's weird that we have to say that, but it is an aspect.
Yeah, for sure. So how have you found transitioning, like, as you know, we've talked a lot about coaching, but what about as a competitor? Like, what have your experiences actually been as a competitor now, particularly in an untested federation, right? You compete untested. I'm not sure of which specific federation you compete with, but it's untested.
So there's a couple. There's the WRPF, and then there's the USPA.
Yep. Okay. So what's been your experience in making that transition to competition in the States as well?
Well, competition is definitely a lot more fast down here. I'm a 165 athlete, so the 165 females, obviously, you know, people know who Hunter Henderson is, Brianni Terry, like all top 165 athletes. But just in general, it's a very broad weight class right now, and I like that the competition is more vast. From a competitive standpoint, it's been interesting to see the different environments of competition. Like I recently attended the Kern, and that was insane.
That would be pretty electric, I imagine.
It was top level lifters. It was a huge show, but like at the end of the day, a meet is still a meet. It's just a meet everywhere you go. I competed for the first time internationally down in Kansas City, Missouri. And JP Price with SBC Barbell, they host that, and they threw a phenomenal meet. And I would literally just go there to compete because they feel such a great meet. People down here that I have met that are part of the community that I'm in really put everything into the competition, and they really, really put everything into the athletes. I'm not saying it's not like that up north in Canada, but it's very different down here. There's just so much more. Yeah. And people love the sport so much that it's always fun.
Yeah. So in terms of like wanting to compete, and again, I think this is something that a lot of people often come across is, you know, you're competing with some, I mean, Brianni Terry and Hunter Henderson are two of the best in the world, right? Yes. Like they're arguably two of the best in the world, and you have no hesitation in competing against them because it's just like just who shows up on the day, right? Like you just show up and you have to get it done. They might be there or they might not. So what would you say to people who seem to have this idea that I'll compete when I'm ready, or I'll compete when I feel like my numbers are good enough, when you are competing against two of the best people in the world? That's I'm not saying that you're not a good lifter, you're an exceptional lifter, but you know, that's also a reality that you're having to face quite regularly. What do you say to the people that are newer to the sport that are just simply like, I'll compete when I'm ready, my numbers aren't good enough yet?
I mean, it's as simple as like, you're never going to feel ready. So you just got to get up there and do it. Because like I've been competing since 2016 and I'm never ready to step on the
Yeah.
platform.
I know you still get nervous, right? You still get very nervous.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But the fact that you get nervous shows that you care.
Mm.
Um, what I really just try to make them understand is that like the competition is one day. It's a few hours. You have to learn to enjoy the aspect of training.
Yeah.
Enjoy the every day that you put into it because that's what you really need to think about. That's where everything is built. It's not about what happens on the platform. I mean, like, yes, what happens on the platform is what matters because that's what goes on up in powerlifting.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it counts. But again, it's a few hours on one day.
Yeah.
So you need to learn to love the process. You need to learn to love the monotonous, the the squatting one day, the benching another day, the deadlifting another day, the benching 2 other days, and then maybe squatting another day, depending on how many days you train. You got to learn to love that Monday to Friday, that Sunday to Saturday, whatever your
Mm-hmm.
training is. You have to love that. You have to love that process, and that's going to get you on the platform.
Yeah.
And it's that everyday process that's you're gonna just do it. Really,
Mm.
it's there's no trick, there's no magic saying. It's just you're really not ever going to be ready for the day that you step on the platform. You just got to do it.
But that's also probably a good thing, right? Like I feel as though if there is a day where you're like, yeah, I'm ready, I've got this, you're probably making some mistakes. Like I think that nervousness and that or almost that level of hesitation just makes you pay attention to some of the smaller details. Like I
Yes.
think you find with a lot of the higher level lifters, although they get used to the stress, they're still very detail oriented, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
they've got their habits and they always go through those same processes. So maybe when we're looking at people that are nervous about it, it's like don't look at that nervousness as a bad thing. Like
No,
maybe
it's
it's
not.
a strength that you can actually lean into. And like you said, it just really means that you care. It just means that it means something to you.
Mm-hmm. And every
So
time you step on the platform, it's a learning experience.
yeah, absolutely.
So don't think about it as as a competition. Think about it as a
Mhm.
learning experience. It's another
Yeah.
step for you to get better.
What have some of your bigger learning experiences been from the platform?
Oh gosh, I bombed at my meet in November, so that was fun.
That would be
uh,
hard.
it was, yeah, it was not a good time,
Was that
but
your squad?
it was.
Yeah.
And the squad is my weakest lift. It has been one lift that I've really just struggled to understand physically,
Mm-hmm.
but we're slowly getting there. I just hit like a volume PR, high bar 320 for a 2x2 today, so that's
Nice.
cool.
Huge.
So we're getting somewhere. But yeah, I bombed out on squats in
Mm-hmm.
November, and I don't want to say I had like a sorry, you can hear the dog barking in the background.
That's all right.
Um, I don't want to say I had like a hissy fit. I just kind of sat down and cried. I was
Yeah.
disappointed in myself.
Yeah.
And then I had somebody come up to me that also bombed in the meet the year prior, and she said, "You can choose to sit here and cry, or you can get your butt up and finish the meet. You
Mm-hmm.
need to be an inspiration to your clients that are here and your future clients.
Yeah.
So
You still
choose
got
wisely."
you might not be able to register a total, but you still have 6 more lifts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I got my ass up and I ended up going 6 for 6 and I PR'd all my lifts.
Nice.
So
that's big. What do you think is important about that? I mean, I've had like a somewhat similar experience. I didn't bomb. Not there's any again, like if you compete enough times, you're probably going to bomb, right? Like there's probably going to be like one competition that you'd be like, that's the one where I bombed. But I missed my first lifts in competition ever in March of this year. And they were my third lifts on squat and bench. And so they were like very exhausting misses too. Like when you miss a third, it really takes it out of you. Like missing a third is probably harder than hitting a third. So going into that, I was like, all right, like got a decision here. Like instead of being down in the dumps, you got to finish, right? You can still finish. There's no reason why you can't finish. What do you think is so important about that? Like what message does that send to your clients when you chose to finish your meet after missing your squats?
I think it just says that, like, you choose whether or not you're going to fail. And if I didn't get up and finish that meet, I would have taken that as a failure.
Yeah.
But because I got up and I chose to finish feeling super embarrassed, it was a learning experience for myself, and I could walk away from that not being a failure because I got up, I brushed myself off and I went out there embarrassed in front of a crowd of people, and it was live streamed, and I still finished the meet. Yeah. So you get to choose whether or not you're going to continue to move forward or not. That's up to you. Nobody else can do it for you. But we're going to make mistakes. We're going to fall down. Get back up and keep going. Really, like, as cliche as it sounds, that's really what I think that message is. It's like, it's part of life. You're going to fall on your ass.
Yeah.
Do you want to keep moving forward? Cool. Then get up and let's go.
Yeah. I mean, it's like when you see, especially topical, right? The Olympics just started, but you see people that are sprinting and maybe tear their calf or tear their hamstring and literally crawl to the finish line because it means so much to them. They would rather say that they finished than maybe blame something external to them. It's like you'd rather see that, right? Like every single time. And again, I think it speaks more to the importance of competition fundamentally, is that everybody has the intention of winning, but just because you don't walk away with a gold medal around your neck doesn't mean you failed.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's always some kind of quantifiable experience that you can take away from that.
Yeah, and just because you don't walk away with a medal or a trophy doesn't mean you didn't win. And I know that, like, there's this winner's win, no participation medal sort of thing, but it's a mental win. It's an emotional win. Yeah. You got up and you decided to finish when everything fell apart. That's a win, because you learn. Now you learn from that experience, and you learn what not to do and what you need to change in order to not have that happen again.
Yeah. And I guess something else important with that, we were talking about, I'll start when I'm ready. It's like, what if on the day that you feel ready, Hunter Henderson shows up? Right? Exactly. Like, you can't control who shows up. The day you feel ready, Ray Williams shows up. You're just like...
It's the same thing with, like, you get to look at your competition. You get to see the fight list. You get to see who you're lifting against. You could say, oh, this chick, I'm never gonna beat her. You never know what's gonna happen on that day. Yep. She could blow her quad. Next thing you know, you're in first place.
Yep. So. Or even just the fact that somebody else showed up doesn't mean that it somehow influenced the level of effort that you put into your own preparation. Like, it didn't.
Exactly.
Like, so, you can only think about yourself and what you've put in, and that's really all you should ever focus on.
Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of people have heard this throughout powerlifting. If you join the sport, it's you against you, really. It's you trying to be better than you were the last time. Yeah, you're competing against other people, but, like, you are going up on that platform to showcase what you have done.
Yeah. I've actually seen a lot of people start to push back against that identity, that idea, and I'm going to push back against it, is that, like, this whole you versus you, and people say, like, no, you have to be in harmony with yourself. Like, well, no, because there needs to be a certain level of discomfort and friction in order for you to decide to become better, right? Like, if you're in complete harmony, then there would be no need to do anything. I think it's it's like
push yourself.
Yeah, it's like this disharmony that allows us to push and become better. I don't think we necessarily need to see friction or anything like that again as a bad thing. We're not supposed to, like, I'm not saying go out and seek suffering, right? Because that's crazy. But certainly there's nothing wrong with friction.
No, there's nothing wrong with being a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah. So the two questions I always finish with here, Amber, what is something that you're seeing a lot of right now, whether it be through social media or just general strength, fitness, training, coaching culture? What is something you're seeing a lot of right now that is happening that you wish would go away? And what is something that you're seeing a lot of right now that you're hoping sticks around and grows?
Something that I wish would go away. Oh, geez. I honestly, I just wish like everybody likes a little bit of beef and competition, but I just think it's so unnecessary.
Mm-hmm.
Especially through social media, people calling people out. It's toxic.
Yeah.
And there was this whole thing in the powerlifting community recently, and there was one side where people were just like, I love seeing this kind of like competition, people butting heads. And I understand that, where it brings more people, it brings more eyes. But at the same time, I do think it's toxic, and I think it's unnecessary.
Yeah.
I don't think social media is a platform to be blasting other individuals. And of course, like, you get to choose who you want to follow, you get to choose what you want to watch, but there's still going to be people that are watching it, and they're going to feed off of it, and you're going to get one side versus the next. And I keep my head down. I don't become a part of it. I don't want to become a part of it.
Yeah.
I think there just needs to be less of that, because we should all be supporting. I'm super cheesy, but I feel like we should all just be supporting each other. It kind of comes the same with like this clash of like tested feds versus untested feds. It's all powerlifting. Why do we have to clash and like hate each other? We're all lifting weights.
It's like we don't need to make any kind of moral assumptions about either side in that scenario, because ultimately, like, who is it helping? I think like a lot of that animosity is just alienating more people than it's helping.
Exactly.
So, you see it a lot, like you said, like, it's like coaches might call out another coach, like, oh, this person, they don't know biomechanics, or they don't know how to do this, and they don't know how to do that. It's like, all you're really doing is further entrenching more sort of tribalist thoughts, right? Because the people that follow, let's say, let you do it, or like anyone, if I'm the guy calling someone out, I'm just further entrenching my own followers into listening to me, and I'm further entrenching that person's followers into only listening and defending them, and nobody's listening to anybody in the middle ground, right? Like, it doesn't actually leave room for open thought or open discussion. It's just like this crazy amount of like groupthink. And I think, it really just like eliminates the ability for anyone to almost like make up their own minds about things. It's like, why do we have to see an idea that we don't like, but attack the person because of it?
Mm-hmm.
So
there's one other thing, and I think I'll just make it short. It's this my way or the highway style of coaching and training. That there's been a lot of like zealots, I guess, out there.
Yep.
And it's like, there's multiple different methods, and those methods work for different individuals. So your way is not necessarily going to be right for somebody else. So why do we gotta call out how somebody else coaches because you don't like it?
Yeah, I mean, I like to say that all roads lead to Rome, right? Like, eventually you'll end up there. So we might see something that we're quite apprehensive of, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong, because again, it's like, how do you know? How do you know empirically that it's wrong, especially if that person is getting results, if that person is getting stronger in their performance?
Exactly. And that is what we want. We want our clients to get results.
Yeah.
So who are you to say that what that coach is doing is wrong?
Maybe you could learn something from them.
Exactly. Ask questions instead of attacking.
Yep. Good. I like it. And something that you hope will grow, something that is happening that you actually think, okay, this is good. I'd like to see this, grow, spread, stick around.
Okay. Maybe this is going to be a little silly, but I'm a female, so I'm going to say that I really love seeing more women becoming okay with, one, gaining muscle, and two, gaining some weight.
Mm-hmm.
And we're getting away from this I need to be small idea. It's okay to be a little big. It's okay to pack on some muscle. It's okay to, I'm 170 pounds. Mm-hmm. When I started, I was 136 when I first weighed in. That's over 30 pounds in 6 years. And I'm better for it. I'm healthier for it. And that's starting to shift where girls are starting to understand that eating more is not going to necessarily make them fat. So this is maybe coming from more of a nutrition standpoint.
Yeah.
There's becoming a lot more understanding that 1,200 calories a day is not good for you. And
yeah,
girls are seeking out more education on, maybe you should be eating a little bit more. Carbs are not bad, all this stuff. It's like fuel your body. And that's what changed my mindset. And that went in like working with Colony. He really helped me change that mindset and flip that switch in my head. That you need to fuel yourself, whether you are an athlete or you're just a person doing everyday things. You need to fuel your body. And I want to see this continue where more women are starting to understand that, and they're not starving themselves, and they're wanting to get into the gym. They're wanting to put muscle on. They're wanting to get strong, because that's really freaking cool.
Yeah. I think, and again, it's like not to cast aspersion against anyone that values being lean. It's just to say that we can create this like open environment for people that don't want to be lean, that they just feel the pressure or expectation to be lean. It's like, you don't have to do that.
There's nothing wrong with being lean. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. I think there's a good balance of, particularly for women, we need to have X amount of fat on our bodies for our hormones to frickin' function. So there's of course a level of like this self-love and obesity. I'm not going to get into that, but I just want to keep seeing women understand that it's okay to eat food.
Yeah.
That it's okay to grow a little bit, rather than this, I need to be skinny to be accepted.
And maybe, valuing strength and its sort of like offshoots, like confidence and being quite self-assured and self-possessed and quite certain of yourself.
It changes how you see yourself immensely, and can speak firsthand on that once I touched a barbell and I started to get strong and my body started to change because of what I was doing. So going back a little bit, when I first went into the gym and I was looking for that trainer, I specifically said, I just want somebody to teach me how to get strong. My body will gain muscle and it will lose fat accordingly. I just want to get strong, and the rest will follow. And I want to see more girls start doing that and continue to do it, because they're starting to.
It's like, how awesome would it be if you just focused on what you can do as opposed to specifically what you look like on either end of those spectrums, right? Like, what if you just focused on what you could do and what you can accomplish?
And I mean, coming from a strength sport, powerlifting mindset, just because you're a powerlifter doesn't give you an excuse to eat like shit.
Yep. I mean, I get it. I'm 120 kilos, right? Like, I get that for sure. I'd love to be able to just crush pizzas and KFC Zinger boxes all the time, but it probably, it wouldn't maybe be as conducive to me performing or feeling good every day. But it also doesn't mean that I can never have that stuff. It just think about what's going to make you feel good. Think about what's actually going to contribute to your health and your performance long term.
Yeah. And in working with women, I mostly do work with women in person. They're getting on that path of learning how to eat better and learning how to eat more food to fuel them. And they're mentally feeling better. Their bodies are starting to change. And they don't want to eat poorly because it makes them feel like crap. They're becoming more aware of what that food makes them feel like.
Yeah.
It's okay to do every now and again, and they understand that, but they like how they feel when they eat well, and they're eating more at the same time. So I want to continue to see this positive trend of women accepting more food into their lives,
Mm-hmm.
accepting that their body is going to change and continue to open that door.
Yeah. Good. I like it. Okay, Amber, that's it for today. So thanks heaps for your time. Thank you for contributing to everything that we had here today. I guess if anybody's looking to get in touch with you, whether that be for coaching or just to talk to you about any of the ideas that you discussed today, how can they get in contact with you?
So the best place to contact me is via social media, so Instagram, and you can find me either just by searching Amber Dawn, or my handle is at a.dawn.vicious. You can also reach out to me through the Generation Strength Gym social media page as well, and that's just at Generation Strength Gym.
Yeah, and we'll also have, when we do a bit of a write up on Instagram, we'll make sure to chuck your handles up on there as well, so people can get in touch with you. But yeah, that's it for today, Amber. I really appreciate your time. Like I said, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And
well, thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, of course. It was also good to hear. You have two corgis. Were they the corgis that were like barking in the background?
I live with 3 corgis actually. I live with 2 other girls, and one girl has 1 and another girl has 2. So Zoe, Lady, and Ellie, and they're
yeah, they're very cute.
Adorable.
I hope that they can make a guest appearance if we have another one.
Yeah. So if anybody loves corgis, follow me on Instagram. I post them all the time.
All right, mate. Well, thank you very much, and we'll talk to you soon. Cheers.
Sir, see you.